This video was created by VinylicPuma of VinylicPumaGaming.
So Borderlands 2 didn't really have a whole lot of dual or multi-elemental weapons. I honestly think this is a shame considering that multi-element weapons are both really cool and could be quite powerful, especially when considered that a multi-element weapon can deal multiple different damage types as well as apply multiple damage over time effects from those different elements. Today I wanted to go over the various dual and multiple element guns and weapons that are available to the player in Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel. So these will be the top 7 best dual and multi-elemental guns and weapons in Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel. Number 7, the Moonface. So the Moonface is both a non-element and explosive dual damage type weapon. Now yes, I know that explosive isn't traditionally considered to be an element, and that non-element is also not an element. That said, I think this gun is worth including because it's two non-elements. Hey, at least it's just low on this list. Okay, so the Moonface might be the first dual element or dual damage type Jacob's weapon in a Borderlands game. What's also cool is that according to the Borderlands wiki, explosive damage bonuses as well as non-elemental damage bonuses boost the damage of the Moonface. Now, the only problem I have with this shotgun is that I find it somewhat difficult to be accurate with. This is because of the fixed smiley face bullet pattern, and that projectile arc is kind of weird. However, if you want a Moonface, you can acquire it by completing the Red, Then Dead side quest mission in Borderlands, the pre-sequel. Number 6. The Boomacorn. So you know how I said that the Moonface might be the first dual damage Jacob's type weapon in a Borderlands game? Well, the Boomacorn is probably the first pan-elemental Jacob's weapon, or even the first pan-elemental gun in a Borderlands game. The Boomacorn can fire projectiles that are either explosive, fire, shock, corrosive, or cryo, and this is random each time. So one time you might get 2 fire projectiles, 1 shock projectile, and 2 corrosive projectiles, while the next time you might get 3 explosive projectiles, 1 cryo projectile, and 1 fire projectile. The problem with the Boomacorn, in my opinion, is the slow projectile speed. This projectile speed can make it difficult to get each projectile to hit on target. However, thankfully, the projectiles do deal some splash damage, so even if the projectiles miss, you get damage from various elemental sources through that splash damage. Originally, the Boomacorn was going to be made available during a Shift community event for Borderlands the pre-sequel. However, now you can acquire the Boomacorn as a random world drop in Borderlands the pre-sequel. Number 5, the Frostfire. The Frostfire is a cryo and fire element SMG made by Chulainn. Now, it's worth mentioning that the Frostfire is very similar to the Chulainn Chulainn SMG in terms of its appearance. However, if I were to compare the two, I think the Chulainn is a better weapon despite the self-slag. The main reason for that is because the Chulainn deals both slag and shock damage simultaneously from each projectile. The Frostfire, on the other hand, deals primarily fire damage with a chance to occasionally freeze an enemy. Of course, the trade-off is that you get a self-freeze effect applied to your character instead of a self-slag effect. Now, while less movement speed is definitely a problem, I would say it's not quite as bad as self-slag is. The shame about the Frostfire is that it can't be acquired legitimately after normal mode, as you receive the Frostfire by beating the raid boss version of the Empyrean Sentinel during the bestest story ever told side quest mission in Borderlands the pre-sequel. Beating the same quest on true Vault Hunter mode and up gives you a head customization for your character. Number 4, the Chulainn. While we briefly mentioned the Chulainn in our previous entry, the Chulainn deals both shock and slag damage. Since you can slag an enemy with it, the shock and slag damage values increase provided an enemy has been slagged. The Chulainn would actually be a fairly decent weapon, as it actually benefits from the B shield more than the Florentine does in Borderlands 2. This is mostly because the Chulainn uses ammo more efficiently, and E-Tech projectiles don't get buffed from the B as much as non-E-Tech projectiles. As mentioned while we were talking about the Frostfire, without a doubt the biggest thing that hurts the Chulainn is the self-slag that is inherent to this weapon. The self-slag isn't so bad on normal mode and true Vault Hunter mode, but becomes quite difficult to use in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode and beyond. Keep in mind, slag in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode makes you take 3 times the damage instead of just 2 times the damage that you would take in normal and true Vault Hunter mode. That all said, if you do want a Chulainn, you can acquire it by siding with the Zaffords during the Clan War Zaffords vs. Hodunk side quest mission for Borderlands 2. Number 3. Minax Atonement Laser. I think this is one of the coolest weapons that got added with the Claptastic Voyage DLC for Borderlands the pre-sequel. Minax Atonement can fire either a fire, shock, or corrosive projectile at random, meaning it's possible to apply up to 3 different damage over time effects to an enemy with one weapon. As you can imagine, this would go really well with Athena for building up Maelstrom stacks, and would go well with Claptrap's Maniacal Laughter skill. You can also get the projectiles to crit with Nisha's Tombstone skill if you decide that you want to do that. I wouldn't consider Minax Atonement to be one of the strongest weapons in the game, but it's definitely a cool weapon to play with and is really fun to use. Minax Atonement is acquired by completing the Rose Tinting side quest mission in Borderlands the pre-sequel. You will need the Claptastic Voyage DLC in order to use this gun and play through that quest. Number 2. The Florentine. The Florentine is what many people consider to be what happens when you do the Chulainn correctly. I personally think Gearbox would have been better off making this a standard projectile weapon as opposed to an E-Tech weapon, because I think the E-Tech projectiles nerf it to some degree. The best way to describe the Florentine is that it's essentially a Chulainn with E-Tech projectiles and no self-slag. The Florentine is also a Seraph weapon, while the Chulainn is just a regular, unique weapon. Now, there are a lot of people that really like the Florentine. While I would say it's more practical than the Chulainn is, I always felt that the Chulainn is a better weapon in the right situations, particularly when you aren't going up against projectile attacks and if you have the B equipped. Otherwise, I would recommend that you do use the Florentine, and what's also worth mentioning is that the best part about the Florentine is that you can buy it in Flame Rock Refuge from the Seraph vendor, provided you have enough Seraph crystals. You also will need Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep DLC, which of course is exclusive to Borderlands 2. Number 1. The Thunderfire. So the Thunderfire is a fire and shock dual elemental weapon. The Thunderfire is also probably the best dual or multiple element weapon in a Borderlands game so far, especially when used by Athena. This is mostly because of the way Athena's Saronic Storm skill tree is set up. You can gain a massive damage bonus from the Thunderfire thanks to its innate ability to deal fire and shock damage, as well as apply fire and shock damage over time effects simultaneously. Since Athena's Maelstrom skill increases elemental damage, and stacks of Maelstrom are gained by dealing fire and or shock damage, you essentially get one of Athena's ultimate weapons. As for the other characters, the Thunderfire is really good in an atmosphere, and is especially good up against fire-vulnerable enemies with or without shields. You can acquire the Thunderfire from either Self-Loathing or Despair in the Subconscious in Borderlands the pre-sequel. You will need the Claptastic Voyage DLC. Anyway guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.